Good morning. Good to see my family today. You too, Gil. We haven't seen him for a while. I've probably seen him more often than you have, but I love seeing my brother. All of my brothers and sisters here. You too, Mike. It's so good to be here. Now, I do have to tell you that I have struggled over this sermon quite a bit. Got the assignment a couple of weeks ago, and it was a struggle. Because the truth, oh, Bill, yes, haven't seen you in a while either. Good to see you, glad you're here. He wouldn't let me pass him up. Came right in to be noticed. That's great. Our text, which was on the screen a little while ago and which you read, it's a very difficult thing. And this, when I was asked to preach a couple weeks ago, I thought that was during the time when we were having rioting and people were unhappy with each other. And this just came to my mind right then that I should develop a sermon about this. And as I started working on it, I talked and I read and I listened to other people's input and got so much differing views that I tried to put that out of my mind and come up with what the Lord impressed me was the view I should deliver to you today. And the sermon is going to be divided into 3 parts. The first part is going to be talking about or trying to define just what it is that God means when He says love. And the second part is how do we put that into practice, actually loving our neighbors or our enemies. And the third part is if we can do that, what effect it will have. That's the 3 parts. And in the very final end, something I really don't like when a speaker does this, but it will be all of us involved. Sometimes I've been to a seminar or something where the speaker says, now we're all going to do this together. We're going to break up into groups. And you know what I think? They just weren't prepared. So, this translation I'm using is the New International, and it starts out like this. But to you who are listening, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those that curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. And in the translation that was on the screen, it said, spitefully use you. I don't know about you, but I'm here to say that that seems like an impossibility. Asking a little bit more of me than I'm even willing to try. How can you love someone who doesn't love you? Or at least treat you well? Sometimes the relationship starts with my earpiece falling off.
The second time.
There, that's better. I probably could do without it, but then some people like Gil would get upset with me, so I'll try to keep it on. How can you love someone who wants to do you harm? Sometimes we have a relationship with someone that starts, like in our story today, with someone who wanted to do them harm, and by going the extra mile, coals of fire made the difference. So it can work. Just it isn't easy. It's much easier for me to like people who like me. I have no trouble loving my wife. Most couples have no trouble with that. We got married because we loved each other. Or at least most of us thought we did anyway. And My wife is genuinely interested in me, and I, believe it or not, am still interested in her. It's important to me to impress her. And I don't have any trouble loving our children. Now, I particularly changed that because I thought she would be here today. When I say my children, she gets upset with me because it's ours. I've been told that many times. Okay, but honestly, they're a part of who I am. Now, I'll tell you the truth, whether it's our church family or our family at home, we do get on each other's nerves once in a while, don't we? Sure, admit it. We have arguments, we have fights. And, you know, those things are hard on everyone around us. I am doing my utmost best not to have any arguments anymore with my wife. I think it's been 6 weeks, maybe a little more than that. We were having one of those things that families have. We were having a fight. We were yelling at each other. Hard to believe that Star could actually yell, but then you don't know her. One time she got so mad at a person, she just hit him over the head with a frying pan while we were out camping. She's not very calm. Well, at any rate, we were yelling, and Mitchell laid down on the couch and started bawling. Right then, I made the what would you call that? I promised myself that I would never have an argument with her again. So far, it's holding out. Now, I bit my tongue a few times, but you know what? I think that's what God calls for us to do. Bite our tongues. Yeah, we get on each other's nerves. But you know, if you're a couple, you know one of the best things in life is making up. Isn't it? And, but then Jesus comes along and he throws a whole monkey wrench into my understanding of what affection's supposed to be. He says to me, not only are you to love those who love you, but we're to love those that don't love us. I just don't understand that. Are you really kidding me there? I tried for a long time to come to grips with this. There must be another definition of love. That's just got to be what it is. And in John 13:34, Jesus says, a new command. I want you to get that right away. Command. It's not an option. It's not a suggestion. It's a command. Love one another, okay, as I have loved you. So you must love one another. So the plan is quite clear. If Jesus loves me, that is my responsibility to love the others, especially those that don't love me. And it's a command. Now, most of the time when we think of love, we think of something that is, shall we say, responsive. You know, you love those that love you. And what are we talking about most of the time? We're talking about a feeling, an emotion. And I'm not downplaying emotion at all. There's a place for emotion. But Jesus didn't say, love those who you like, those who make you feel good about yourself. He said, the command is to love like I love. How is it that Jesus loves us? What is the criteria? Many people love pizza. Some of you love baseball. I don't know anybody that doesn't love a good spring day. Okay? We love our children. Even if they're rebellious teenagers. She's not listening. We love our children even when they're rebellious teenagers. Still not listening. I love my church family. Most of them.
All of them.
You know, love's a very complex thing. We, in our society, we've got one word for so many things, and it just confuses the issue. The Greeks had 4 famous words for love. And if you've heard any sermons, you've heard those 4 words. The first one that I have here, I can't pronounce these things, so I'll just tell you what I think they're for. The first one is for affection. Affection, the watch care we give each other in our family. The bonding between parents and their children. That's the first one. The second one, well, I know that one because it's contained in so many others, eros, erotic. And don't cheapen anything. This would cover everything from romance to passion, from the relationships between men and women. And the third one that I'm going to use is a general word for love. The Greeks had this philia. Yeah, I promised myself I wouldn't try to pronounce these things. But anyway, it's a general word. It's the love of friendship. It's the bonds of shared interests and mutual enjoyment. You know, things we can enjoy together. This is usually meant, we say we like someone or something. And these are not to be belittled. I have heard speakers come through these first 3 words and they will say, treat them as if they were minor, not so important. Quite frankly, folks, these are gifts from God. The ability to actually love these things, to love each other. And the fourth type, we tend to elevate it, but it's on the same par. The early Christian church adopted the word agape and used it to describe the type of love that God has for us. The type of love He's asking for us to have for each other. Now, the difference in the first 3 is that they are responsive. You know, I love you, you love me, you've been good to me, we develop a friendship and a like for each other. But the fourth one isn't like that at all. The Bible says that God loved us long before we ever loved Him. He loved us from the beginning. No responsiveness to that. He just flat out decided to love us. And He loves us whether we love Him back or not. Totally out of the first 3. The fourth love is not a feeling. It's a choice. If you love God, you choose to do it. You choose to treat someone who's not too good to you kindly, generously, graciously. And it's not a love on how you make me feel. It's how I choose to treat you. If you want to know what Jesus is wanting for you, it's you to make the choice to treat each other, especially those who you don't like, well. Treat them kindly, generously, graciously. Again, it's not how you make me feel. It's how I choose to react to you. There's an old Jewish folk tale about someone, and I'm having a lot of trouble keeping that. My ears aren't big enough. It's about a guy named Abraham, and some of you may have heard this tale before, and it's not the Abraham of Scripture. Someone like him. Abraham was sitting outside his tent when he saw a stranger approaching one evening. I understand that in the Middle East desert, you can see a long ways. And he saw this stranger coming down the road. And Abraham got up from his sitting place and ran down the road across the desert there to meet a stranger. And when he got there, he gave him a big embrace and invited him into his home and fed him and gave him some good things to drink. And as this stranger was also seated in Abram's tent, getting ready to eat this good food that Abram had provided, he went right to started to eating it and didn't even say, "Thank you, Lord," or even "Thank you, Abraham." He just did not have a blessing to say or didn't offer a prayer of thanksgiving for the food. And so Abraham said, "Don't you worship God?" And the stranger said, "I worship the fire god." Abraham got very, very angry. He picked the guy up by his shoulders and threw him out of the tent out into the damp night air. You see, a lot of us are like that. If people don't do things our way, we're not very happy with them. That's not an uncommon situation. It's not what they do for us. It's what we do for them that counts. And so Abraham was sitting there kind of smug with himself. He had just vindicated God. Stood up for him, you see? And he heard God speak to him. "Abraham, where's the stranger that came to visit?" Abraham said, "He did not honor you, God. He didn't even say a blessing for his food. And he doesn't worship you, God. So I kicked him out. I stood up for you, God." God replied to Abraham, he says, "Do you know that for 80 years I've suffered with that man? I loved him although he dishonors me. Couldn't you endure him for just one night?" Wow. Kind of describes for me what God's love is like. It's kind of hard to keep loving someone who keeps giving you a hard time, who keeps disrespecting you. But God's love lays his self aside for the benefit of the other person. God's love is selfless, generous. And this is the real important word I'm going to say. Listen close. God's love is unconditional. Unconditional. You know, I love my brother, my blood brother, Jim. But you know, when we were kids, it was so hard to put up with him. I only loved him because he was my brother, not because I liked him. But God is saying to me that I should love him unconditionally, whether he embarrasses me or not. And I guess that's the way it is with my church family, my brothers and sisters here. I need to love each one of them unconditionally, whether they embarrass me or not.
Amen.
Some of you embarrass me. The third thing I want to say about God's love is it's forgiving. That's easy to say. But the truth is, it never tries to get even. Come on. You and I get hurt. I tell you the way it is with me. I remember when I went to work every day as a college professor, and there were people would hurt me. And I would think, oh, this is what I can do to get even. But you know, I could never do it because they would know it was me. And then I'd get in trouble. So I couldn't ever get even with them. I was so glad that I didn't. Because I know that the Lord didn't want me to get even. Reminds me of a story that happened out in Nebraska. And I'm told the name of the town where it happened is Broken Bow. You know that's got to be someplace out in the west, right? And one evening, it had just gotten dark, and a truck driver wheeled his rig in off the road into this truck stop and went in, and he ordered burger and fries and coffee, and he was sitting there. And there were also 3 typical, what you would think in your mind, motorcycle riders. You know, whatever you can get an image of how bad these guys were, that's what it was in the truck stop. And one of them got up and started giving him a real hard time, calling him names and sissy and all kinds of things. And another one got up and grabbed his hamburger and took a bite out of it. One of them grabbed his French fries and started eating those. And the first one grabbed his cup of coffee and took a drink. Now, what do you expect out of this burly old truck driver? Well, how would you respond? Now, some of you are just too skinny and short and hadn't got, maybe once I would have responded, but I don't think I would respond at all. I'm too scared. But the truck driver, he was in a position. He got up out of his chair, picked up the check, reached in his bag and got the money and walked to the front of the cafe, put his money on the cash register and walked out. The waitress walked and followed him to the door, watched him as he walked out across the parking lot, and she took his money and put it in the cash register drawer. And then she walked back to where the motorcycle guys were. And one of the motorcycle guys said, "Wasn't much of a man, was he?" The waitress said, "Well, I don't know about that, but he's sure not much of a driver. He just ran across 3 motorcycles on his way out of the lot." Just as sure sounds good, doesn't it? I know you all like the outcome of that. That's human nature to like that. Get even. We all want to get even from time to time. That's the world's answer to being wronged. Get even. But Jesus gave his followers different marching orders. Some of you might think, I don't have to worry about loving my enemies. I don't have any. I'll tell you the truth. If you don't have an enemy today, you'll have one by tomorrow. It's a fact. It's awfully hard to get along with people. Especially your people you're close to sometimes. Maybe a fellow worker, somebody in the church. It's so hard sometimes to get along. There are some people who you are never going to be able to like or get along with. So how are we supposed to survive in this world when Jesus says, love your enemies? It doesn't seem possible. It seems possible to enjoy when the 3 motorcycle drivers get their motorcycles ridden over. We can all enjoy that. But what does Jesus say we should be doing? He answers the question. Do good to those who hate you. Hate's an awfully strong word, isn't it? I'd rather use a word like dislike me, or angry with me, or something else in that. I really struggled to find something as good as hate, but not so strong. The fact is, I haven't found anything as good. Anger just isn't strong enough. Dislike me just isn't strong enough, because I know a lot of people who dislike me. I remember when you told someone, I found Robert awfully hard to take when I first met him, but I love him now. That's awfully common to have people dislike. But to do good for these people, I don't think it's too hard to imagine that this teaching was totally foreign to the society of Jesus' time. I think it's even foreign to our society, isn't it? Do good to those who hate you. In fact, I have read that the rabbis were teaching, you love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I think that's a rule we can all get behind, right? No, that's not what Jesus said, is it? It doesn't take any spiritual power to love those people who love you. Doesn't take any kind of power at all. In verse 32 of our chapter, it says, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. So, when Jesus calls for us to love those who hate us, that's totally foreign, totally contrary to our human nature. Get revenge. Run over the motorcycles. Human nature tells us when someone messes with us, we need to bring down the hammer on them. One of the things our culture teaches us, think about this, I'm sure you've heard this, revenge is sweet. Getting even. Isn't that what our culture teaches us? It's going to make you feel better. No, that's not true. Anger. I understand anger can cause your blood pressure to go up, especially if you have a problem with it already. Anger certainly increases your breathing rate. All of this could have a strain on your heart. Could cause I've heard people getting angry and dying from strokes and heart attacks. Fortunately, I'm in better health than that. But I will say that it has triggered headaches and sleepless nights. I understand, I've been told, that anger can even weaken your immune system, so you're susceptible to other diseases and things. I assume that's prolonged anger. I wouldn't know what one little half a minute anger would do that, but it might. I don't know that. Have you ever seen someone, especially I've seen this in children, and some adults, when they get angry, I mean really angry, and it's happened to me as an adult. I had to go and hide because I started crying. You know what I'm saying? You see that in children especially. But I know it happens to adults because it's happened to me. I must have been really angry at that time. If anger, hatred for your enemies, can hurt you physically, think about what it's doing to you spiritually. It destroys you spiritually. If we are harboring hatred for someone, how can God speak to us? How can He get through that barrier that you've thrown up? And what text we've already looked at, you should already understand. It is contrary. It is against His will for us to have that kind of a feeling. He says, love our enemies. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you're angry, it becomes the focus of your life? You can't think about anything else. It doesn't matter what's going on. Your thoughts, your focus totally on the person who wronged you in some way. How can we gain freedom from this prison that hate brought to us, that we allowed ourselves to be put into? Well, our text for today, Jesus says, do good to them that hurt you. It's really hard for someone to hate you when you're doing good for them. Kindness and love change people.
Amen.
A parable that I read is about a gentleman named Watchman Nee, N-E-E. And he told a story about a Christian Chinese man, or maybe I should say a Chinese Christian. I don't know which way is right. But this Christian man was raising rice. And you're all familiar, I'm sure, that if you're growing rice, it needs a very wet environment. And in fact, those people in the Orient who grow rice have irrigation systems set up so that they can flood their fields. They get little boards set up. I've seen this on TV where they run the pump and the boards direct the flow of water. So, Christian, what was his name? Chinese Christian, that's all I know him by. Nee was the guy who was the observer. At any event, he went out every day and pumped the water for his irrigation system. And every day his neighbor, Mr. Nee, came over and removed the boards so the water all flowed into his field. Now, the Christian prayed about it. He dwelt on this problem. What should I do as a representative of Christ? And as he sat, prayed, and listened, God gave him the answer. The next day, before he pumped the water, he removed the boards that separated their two fields. So when he pumped the water, it automatically went in to his neighbor, Mr. Nee's field to start with. And when he had filled that field, he replaced the boards and filled his own field with water too. Said that he was overwhelmed with guilt. Some of you are going, yeah. But it's what happened. And so he contacted his Christian neighbor and thanked him and told him how great it was, what a great representative he was for his religion, for God. And he would like to know more about a religion that could make a man not get even, but get even by being good. In practice, this might mean for us doing things for people we don't like. After all, what is the reason for a parable but to teach you something, right? So what could you do? Maybe you could mow your neighbor's lawn, especially the one who's mean-spirited to you. Or maybe you could do something nice for your coworker who isn't always very generous with you. Or it might mean being helpful and kind to a fellow church member that you've had words with. I don't know what it really means for you to treat your enemy with kindness and do good things. You have to decide what that is. But if you do these kinds of things, you'll be surprised by the personal freedom and joy it brings you. Even if you don't change the other person and you don't get the result that we're talking about, think of the personal joy that it brings you to do good for someone else. So, our first response that Jesus has instructed us is to do good for your enemies. The second response, bless those who curse you. Now, I know, Gil, that you've heard the phrase, sticks and stones will break my bones. What's the rest of it, folks? That's a total lie. That's a total lie.
Absolutely.
There's nothing that hurts you rather than someone calling you names. It hurts and it hurts and it hurts. Whether you're 5 years old or 55 years old, it still hurts. And when we choose our words to react to being hurt, because that's what happens, right? We react and we say words to hurt back again, don't we? You know what that is? That's throwing a can of gasoline on the fire. That's putting salt in somebody's wounds. And you know what salt does? Into a cut? It stings, doesn't it? And it causes people to try to get away. And typically you get a really bad reaction. So that's one reason Jesus tells us that one of the best ways to react to our enemies is to bless them. Hard to do, but it can be done. In fact, you don't have to just wait for Jesus to tell you this. It's generally good knowledge. You know, the book of Proverbs is filled with lots of good knowledge, good general information. Proverbs 15 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Puts salt in the cut, doesn't it? A Christian lady lived out in the country a little ways, and she was raising chickens. She had some nice looking chickens. 2 of her chickens got out of the pen they were in and went next door and enjoyed the neighbor's flower beds. Now, I have personal knowledge of that kind of thing. The chickens can wreck a flower bed really fast. And the neighbor didn't give it a chance. He caught those 2 chickens, wrung their neck, and threw them back over the fence. Some people respond like that, don't they? What would you do if you were the Christian woman with the dead chickens on your hands? Well, she certainly gave me something to emulate. She went out, picked up the chickens, dressed them out, and made 2 pot pies. Chicken pot pies. Took one to the neighbor and apologized for the chickens getting in the neighbor's flower beds. He couldn't believe it. Her children followed her over to the neighbor's house and then hid so that they wouldn't be part of what was going on, you see. They expected big, big trouble. The neighbor softened so much. He apologized for being so harsh and accepted one of the pies and told her he knew the Lord would be blessing her. The next time you see a person who just ticks you off, think of a kind word or deed to share with that person. Do it, not because you want them to change or be nice to you. Do it because that's what Jesus told you to do. I think of times when people have wronged me. Instead of just moving on, I dwelt on what they did or what they said. And it consumed my thoughts. It ruined my day, ruined my week, until I could face them and try as I might for a kind word. Because the times I didn't give them a kind word, when I responded in kind, nothing changed. I didn't feel any better. I felt guilty because I knew that's not what Christ wanted me to do. The third thing, I was discussing this sermon with Alan Shepard last week, and he brought up to me the third thing. Do good to those who despitefully use you. I got to grow bigger ears, that's all. Do good to those who despitefully use you. Pray for those who mistreat you. So what's the solution when you're being mistreated? You know, I kind of think that's the stopgap measure. You know, the first thing was to do good. The second thing was to bless. They've been too hard for you to do those things. It's just beyond your capabilities. So what are you capable of doing? The stopgap measure is to pray. You see, everybody here can pray. And I mean honestly do it. And you don't have to let anyone else know you're praying. I remember a cartoon because it used my name. Little 3-step cartoon. It was on the wall of a church that I attended. And in the first frame, John says, "There's Robert. Dear Lord, I want to know that I'm praying for Robert and he should be in church with us on a regular basis. Hello, Robert, I've been praying for you." Don't do it like that. Be honest with it, and you don't have to tell anybody. Not if you're really doing it. Pray for those. Jesus' solution to pray for those who mistreat you is a solution that really works. When we pray for someone else's heart to be changed, it doesn't always happen. But I guarantee you that what always does happen is your heart is changed. The Lord makes you able to deal with that undealable situation. So, we've talked about what God expects of us when he says love. And we've talked about how to deal when you have this neighbor, this person, this friend, those who hate you, mistreat you, curse you, despitefully use you. Now, in John 13:35, why is this important? Would you turn this mic back on? This is just causing me too much trouble.
The battery died a few minutes ago, actually.
Well, thank you. I didn't like it anyway. Now it's caught here somewhere inside of my coat. There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have we got the text up? 35. This is the reason all of this is important. By this, all will know that you are Christ's disciples. If you have love for one another. Now that's the bottom line. That's what this is all about. You know, if you are unable to show love for the person that you believe has wronged you, you know, God will handle it all by himself. He doesn't need you. But what he does need you for is everyone needs to know that Christianity works. That's what they need to know. That it's worthwhile, worth doing. There was a Christian theologian by the name of Francis Schaeffer. He wrote that the world has a right to judge Christians by the way they treat each other. He wrote, "Our relationship with each other is the criterion the world uses to judge whether or not our message is truthful." Have you ever heard the text in the Bible that says, this gospel shall be preached into all of the world. And if you can't hear me right now, I raise my voice a bit. And then shall the end come. You heard that before?
Yes.
I attended a seminar, a meeting, whatever it's going to be called, a couple of years ago anyway. And a Seventh-day Adventist church historian, George Knight. Anybody ever hear of him? He's up in Andrews. He used that text and he said, why hasn't the world ended? Why hasn't God come? Because in truth, there isn't a place on the world that they haven't heard of Jesus. Now, you may have some way of tweaking that to say, oh yes, but they didn't do it this way, they didn't do it that way, whatever. I'm going to say that Jesus Christ is known the world over. Okay? Why isn't he here? Because we didn't understand the message. The gospel is a gospel of love for each other. And when we learn to love each other, Jesus will return. Because what does he need? He needs his message honored, proved that indeed Christian love works. Jesus is telling us that if you love the person who's done you wrong, if you love the person that hasn't done you wrong, it doesn't matter how that person makes you feel. You're to love that person anyway. It doesn't matter how much you like them. It doesn't matter how much they like you. You have to love that person anyway. And I'm going to read a quote. Until love in our church rises above our constantly changing feelings, until it rises above our petty differences, until it rises above our superficial likes and dislikes, we will never see the power of God working in the church.
Amen.
And we will never make a huge impact in the world. It is this new kind of love, the fourth kind, that shows the power of God. It's new kind of love that draws people to him. It was the closing night of Vacation Bible School. The teacher of one of the Vacation Bible School classes missed Thursday night. Well, we'll give her that, won't we? She was there every other night. And on Friday night, when they had their closing program, she did her part. Lori, she marched all those kids right up on the platform and realized that the one child she had never met was there that Friday night. He was only there Thursday and Friday. And to her horror, it just not bowled her over. She didn't know what to do. This child only had one hand. And first thought was the kids will make fun of him. What she should have thought is, how am I going to deal with this? Because as the kids were doing their program, she told them, now is the time to make the church. Do you know that little kids thing they do? Here's the church, and here's the steeple. And as soon as she did it, she froze. She realized that child only had one hand and couldn't participate. One of the children on the stage came to her rescue. A little girl said, "Here, we'll make the church together."
Amen.
Now, if you understand my point in this closing story that I just told you, this parable, Is it really of use to you? Then you will join me with someone near you, and together we can make the church. If you don't understand it, I guess you're not making any churches.
Amen.
We talk all the time about why members come and go. We don't see them anymore. It bothers me. But I guess we're just not making enough churches. Okay?